we will start with 4 regions. One one in Middle East, where the Majlis Al Hassan institution will be one node of this observatory. We'll have also a node, and we are in negotiation now with the Organization of American States to have an anchor of the observatory there. And for West Africa and African region, we will have an anchor and a pillar of the observatory in Senegal, in the Ministry of Water, but also in a university. And all of this will be linked with a charter or MOU with 2 capacities. First, each of the nodes will have the capacity to analyze, a strong capacity of to analyze and to follow the work realized in this document by the High-Level Panel on Water and Peace. Also to analyze the development on this question and the region, in the region on water and peace. And a second aspect is the creation of safe space. This means the capacity in the region to create an enabling environment to tackle hot topic or specific important topic related with water, peace and security. And of course, each of these nodes will not work together, and it will be also a network for itself. And for example, I mentioned some evident partner that will support the Majlis Al Hassan institution, as IUB, as MEDREC, and others. Our work is really in the boundary or in the superposition of 2 agendas, the water agenda and the peace agenda. And all that we are doing is inside of these 2 agendas. And we have now advanced on some tools that could also support the observatory. These tools will not be developed by the observatory, but these tools will help the observatory, and these tools in process now are first development, I would like to say, of the recommendation of the High-Level Panel on Water and Peace. For example, protection on water infrastructure during the conflict. My colleague, Mara Tessino, which is here, is working with a large network of academia and university to have some sort of a compendium of what is existing at the level of international water law to protect the water infrastructure during the conflict. The monitoring, Dr. Turk mentioned the importance of data. Now, a group also of universities and academia are working on this question of data, linked with WMO, which is one of the key actors for hydrometeorological data with UNEP, but also with the capacity to analyze the risk of conflict, on water conflict. And we know that these conflicts are not just the result of scarcity. We need also to have other ingredients. So to better understand the conflict, we will also have a capacity to analyze the social, economical, and cultural dimension which drive or not to a conflict. And Just also another tool which is in the beginning of the development is responsible mining. I just would like to highlight this because not all the tension on water are transboundary. We have also a lot of local tension, for example, between mining extraction and the local uses of water for agriculture, water for people. So the panel recommend to create a code of conduct, or to induce the creation of a code of conduct for the multinational companies which are in the mining extraction. And it's a tool which is in development. So all these tools will support the work of the observatory. And just to give you now, to answer to the question of Natasha, a small example of a safe space. We just had a safe space, a launch, a movement of safe space on the question of the Sahel at the global level. You all know that in the Sahel, we have now various sources of tension, insecurity, and armed group which put in danger this region. The global response now is mainly to finance more arms for the local army. We are now in a safe space to see what is the role of water, what is the role of development to assure this reduction of the risk and tension in the Sahel. And we had a long exchange with various actors, for example, with one general from the army, with the local representative of the local population, etc., to address the role of the development for the security and peace, and also to try to advocate for to the military effort how this aspect has to be considered. Sorry. So, with this, I think I have presented this observatory and the safe space, and of course, we are open for more development. But again, it's not a closed process, it's something which is open, and I am sure that the close future will have other institutions that will join this capacity of analysis and this capacity to create safe space in this global observatory. Thank you.
Thank you. Saving the lady the last. Carol, in your work, the work that UNESCO was leading in the region, particularly on the SDGs, and the work that you yourself are heavily involved in, where does this water peace discourse play out? And do you see the proposed safe space and the global observatory having any role in reinforcing the kind of work that you are leading on? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha, distinguished panelists, Your Excellencies. ESCO was not involved in the Blue Peace Initiative before. We were not part of the process. There were various views in terms of how that was developed. However, we do have to say that this opportunity to create a global observatory for water and peace presents opportunities for synergies on the work that ESCO has been doing. And in the spirit of ensuring complementarity and coherence and economizing resources and opportunities to avoid confusion between countries, we are open and very pleased and honored to be part of this panel to speak with you about our ideas and ways that we might work together, potentially in the future, for the help of this region and for water and peace in generally. As mentioned, ESCO has a long-standing program on water and peace. We look at it from a water security perspective. And from a water security perspective, it's grounded on basically 3 pillars of work. We look at assessment in order to inform science. We looked at dialogue to foster exchange among stakeholders. And we look at intergovernmental processes that do lead the international law processes that move things forward. So if I could just identify a couple of those examples and show and share where there might be opportunities in the future and maybe some gaps that also could be filled from the work of this newly launched observatory, especially given our long-standing cooperation with the Majlis al-Hassan here, of course, and other work we've done with the WMO, as mentioned, on climate, etc. So on assessment, I'm sure many of you have already heard about this. We work very closely with the German government and BGR to develop an inventory of shared water resources for Western Asia. And in that inventory that was launched about 4 or 5 years ago now, there was an identification of 9 surface water bodies and actually 17 groundwater bodies that are shared just in the Mashriq region of the Arab world. And it showed how much shared water is here. I mean, often we get focused on just some of the more appropriate, newsworthy items, let's say, in the global press about some conflicts. But there are a lot of shared resources that are continuing and that have mechanisms in place. And there's a lot that don't, but they continue to require our attention in order to manage water safely inside the region. And when in doing this inventory, the idea was, as was mentioned as one of the experiences here with the observatory, is to provide an impartial basis where there would be maps, basin chapters, analysis that can inform, therefore, dialogue across countries and across stakeholders with a neutral set of maps that then both parties or more than 2 parties could come together and talk about. And actually, ESCO has been doing that. We had something on the Jordan River. We had another consultation at Chatham House on the Euphrates River, using these types of maps to come across and provide a basis for conversation on quantity issues, on allocation issues, and quality, which I'm very glad to hear has come to the fore, because quality is really the next frontier here when we think about access to water resources in our already water-scarce region. And what we did, we took that work on mapping, basically the transboundary resource in the region, and we linked it also to another dimension with the thanks of the German and the Swedish government on climate change, because climate change is actually becoming a multiplier when we think about the tensions on transboundary and the need to think about the peace dimensions. Because as water becomes more scarce, the need to therefore find more innovative ways of managing the scarce resources that are due to human conditions and human conditions related to the climate become more important. So actually we took a lot of the basin work and linked it to hydrological and climate models to come out with results that are informing also the work of the Arab Ministerial Water Council. So, and who actually requested specifically climate change modeling on shared basins to better understand what it means for Arab to Arab issues, water issues within the country, and of course, as we look at water and climate and peace and the stresses on the resources and the larger MENA domain. So taking that information, we also look at how to link it to dialogue. And I was very pleased to hear right now about the importance of not only dialogue between countries, but between different types of stakeholders. We're pleased to have Natasha actually with us in Beirut just in May, where we had a symposium on water, women, water security, and peace building. Because this story, yes, it is a transboundary and the need for women diplomats as well for being part of the conversation, but it's also accessibility at the local level. And Jordan, for one, and Lebanon, where ESCWA is based, see firsthand the stresses that are being placed on different vulnerable communities, women and girls, the disabled, those who are physically challenged, to access resources, particularly in the beginning of the conflict, before all the excellent donor support and UN agencies really came to the fore to help provide those resources. But that was a source of conflict, and we know it's definitely here in Jordan, we know definitely in Lebanon, host communities and the conflict regarding water and peace at the local level. So it's not only the industry, but also looking at this and maybe, perhaps, providing a safe space for that conversation, because those tensions continue to rumble, and there might be an opportunity where civil society components, as well as the intergovernmental transboundary components, might play in. And then on the final pillar, regarding intergovernmental processes, ESCO has been very pleased to support the Arab Ministerial Water Council, which, like ACWA, was just established 10 years ago. The first session of the Arab Ministerial Council was actually in June 2009 in Algiers, And one of their first mandates was to look at the shared water issues, but also looking at it from an Arab to Arab perspective. So when we say that Arab countries are dependent on upstream waters, it's not only non-Arab countries, but it's from water from other Arab countries. So we're looking at that in the lens of how to ensure peace and water dialogue amongst Arab countries who should be already looking in a common lens of priorities is one of the things ESCO has been actively supporting the Council with the League of Arab States, with annual meetings actually to develop a common set of guidelines for better managing water resources. So again, we're doing this all within the framework of water security, and just to wrap up, because I know our time is short, I wanted to highlight that looking at water security, we really have to look at it not only the peace and water nexus, but it's really the water, energy, food, climate change nexus that comes to the fore. Because you can't just look at the water sector alone here. We have to look at what it means for power generation, what it means for food security, what it means for accessibility and health. And as we look at that in the SDG context, I'd like to just have a reflection, and we really would like to commend also the Swiss government, who is a leader in making sure in SDG 6, which is on water access, water for all, to come into the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. But I ask you to reflect. There is a target under SDG 6.4 that aims in the target to reduce significantly the number of people facing water scarcity. There is no indicator for that target. Also, that target is nested in a target that talks about water use efficiency, which has to do with efficiency in agriculture, which obviously is the most consuming sector in our region, which has to do with domestic and industrial water use efficiency. Now, when you are more efficient, there's more water available for you to then allocate to different resources. But isn't it interesting that the number of people, the objective to pursue the number of people, to reduce the number of people facing water scarcity is nested under an efficiency target and not under target 6.5 that has to do with integrated water resource management and shared water resources. So in this region, when we think about peace and water and the issues, we might nest it maybe under water supply, the focus of this conference, access to water supply and sanitation. We might nest it on shared water, which is the focus of this topic. But I just ask you to reflect that sometimes how we position an issue defines how we address the issue, and this is also why we are so much more interested, let's say, in pursuing this type of observatory and complementarity with our work to ensure that